Hi everyone. So we are on our last domain and range notation. So this one is interval notation. And here's just a recap of what we've gone over. So we've gone over set notation. Remember, sets have the curly braces. Algebraic inequality. This is just using the inequality part of our set notation. So now we're going to go over interval notation. So with interval notation, it helps if we know what's going on in the algebraic inequality. So in order to do that, I'm going to write down a number line and I'm going to mark where my 12 is. Since it's greater than, I know it's going to be an open circle, and my x is greater than 12. So I'm going to shade all the area that is greater than 12. So if we see there is no endpoint, it goes on forever. So it goes on for up to infinity. So keep in mind that infinity isn't a set number, okay? So that's going to be important in our interval notation. So all I'm going to do is take the point where my graph starts, which is at 12, and where my graph ends, which is to infinity. Now, since infinity isn't a real number, I'm gonna put a parentheses, because you can't tell me a specific number that infinity is, right? It's just like this idea that it's endless. So that's a parentheses. And since 12 is an open circle, that is also going to be a parentheses. And that is interval notation, so not too bad, right? So let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about interval notation and go over an example. So like I said, with interval notation, there's two things that are important to know. So here in my number one, I'm going to put two numbers, because in order to write down your interval notation, you need to know two numbers. And these numbers are going to tell me where the graph starts and where it finishes. The second thing that is important to know is whether I'm going to have brackets, which I really hope that's how you spell brackets. Whoops. Or if I'm going to have parentheses. Parentheses, I always spell that wrong. Okay, so if you don't know what brackets look like, it's these things, and then parentheses is what those look like. So remember, our brackets are for closed circles, our parentheses are for open circles. This means greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, and our open circle is just greater than or less than. So let's do an example. So over here, I have that my x, my domain, is between -8 and 2. So -8 is less than or equal to x, which is less than 2. So let's go ahead and write this down using interval notation. So let's start off with our number one. Number one means I need two numbers where I start and where I finish. So I know I start at -8 and I finish at 2. Okay, got that down. So now number two, am I going to use brackets or parentheses? Well, looking at my symbols, it looks like this less than or equal to tells me my -8 is going to be a bracket, and this less than tells me that my 2 is going to be a parentheses. Okay, not too bad, right? Okay, so let's put it all together in one example. And here I went ahead and put it in using all the notations. If you want to give it a shot, go ahead and pause the video and fill it in. Once you restart it, we can see if our answers match up. Okay, so that is our set notation in our algebraic inequality. make sure you're using the x's and your y's, because I've had to redo a lot of videos when I use my x's in my range. And oh, okay, so let's start with interval notation. So we're gonna look over at our graph, and we're gonna see on our domain where it starts and where it finishes. So it starts at -4, it finishes at 3. Now am I going to use brackets or parentheses? Well, at -4 it's an open circle, so I'm going to use a parentheses. At 3 it's a closed circle, so I'm going to use a bracket. And interval notation. So now for my range, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to see where it starts and where it finishes. So it starts here at -3 and it goes up until 5. And am I going to use brackets or parentheses? Well, here at -3 I have an open circle, so parentheses. Up at my 5 I have a closed circle, so that's a bracket. And that is interval notation, set notation, and algebraic inequality.